this isn't like a near perfect movie. It's really long. There's a lot to be said about like where you choose to tell this story from and how you do it, but everything else in the thing is just flat out genius and it's like larger than
Okay. So it's a very, very good movie. Maybe not over 90%.
yeah.
So where did it
And
end up on Rotten Tomatoes?
over 90%.
Oh,
So hey, welcome to the High Contrast Podcast. I'm Eric.
I'm Will.
So yeah, when we used to record this, I was looking this direction the whole time because I used to
Mm.
talk to you on my desktop and whatnot. And so I would always have to like invert me so that I would be looking this way and be like a mirror image of myself. And so this is the real me. We're back here doing a podcast, doing and it's funny. I might actually insert the clip here of 3 years ago where I said, "Welcome back to Critics Critique, or potentially moving forward, the High Contrast Podcast." Oh, yeah, I probably should have talked about that before we started recording. What we are going to do is we're going to talk about relevant pop culture news from the past month, which will make more sense as we do monthly posts with this. And then there will be one movie a month that we go through critics critique for, which for newcomers is taking the movie, evaluating the critical reaction to that movie, and determining whether or not it's fair. We are rating the raters because everything is personal opinion, anyways. Then we are going to get into Skittles O'Henry.
Oh my God.
And then after that, we talk about predictions for the month ahead because last year was insane when it comes to
Mm.
pop culture. Last year was possibly, depending on what happens over the next 2 years or so, the year that superhero blockbusters imploded. Two highest grossing movies of the year were Barbenheimer, Oppenbarbie,
Right. Right. I figured as much.
Barbenheimer. So with Barbie being like the highest grossing movie in Warner Brothers history, you still have the idea of like an IP as like the blockbuster thing is still kind of going strong. But then Oppenheimer, not an existing IP, R rated, over 3 hours long, still with a re-release that is going through right now for campaign season, may crack $1 billion. Things were shaken up a bit last year. It wasn't as strong of like a horror year as
Mm.
2022. Did you watch horror movies in 2022? Because they were all good.
I
Um,
don't. Do you have any quick examples of 2022 horror movies?
Barbarian is the first one that comes to mind for like other reasons. Jordan Peele's Nope, X and Pearl,
Oh. Oh.
Smile, The Menu. Some people consider that a horror movie, and that was one of the best movies of the year. Um,
Of the movies you've mentioned, I have only seen one of them, and now my brain won't let me remember what it was. And that is Nope,
yep,
which is one of my favorite movies of all time.
really, that
Yeah.
good. Cool,
To
cool,
me,
cool.
Jordan Peele's movies only escalated in quality starting at a very high watermark
Ah,
with Get
cool.
Out.
Yeah, Us has grown on me over time.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it doesn't stop there. There's like Bones and All, which if you haven't seen that is gut wrenching and amazing, and it's by Luca Guadagnino, the guy who did Call Me by Your Name and the Suspiria remake, and
Huh.
it's about cannibals, and it's so touching. It was a banger year for horror, and
But less
but
so 2023.
2023, I mean, there were like good movies, but obviously a huge thing that happened was the writers' strike.
Hmm. Right.
And that caused this massive cluster of we're not going to put this movie out until we can promote it for awards season and with actors being able to speak on it. And so December was a nightmare. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny was over 2.5 hours.
Oh my God.
Uh Napoleon was like close to 3 hours. Uh, 2.5 hours. Hunger Games. Mission Impossible, almost 3 hours. Beau is Afraid, just 1 minute under 3 hours. John
Dang.
Wick Chapter 4, 10 minutes under 3 hours. Killers of the Flower Moon, 3.5 hours. Oppenheimer, 3 hours. It was such a breath of fresh air to get to like random movies like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Hmm. Which I'm guessing had a significantly lower runtime.
I think it was still over like an hour and 40 minutes, but it, man,
Oh
with
yeah.
like the score by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, it's like it's got this like pace to it and it
I
breathes.
I'm glad you said that. Trent Reznor is not making enough music for entertainment. He needs to make more.
I agree. American Fiction, if you haven't
Yeah.
seen it,
I
is
haven't
worth
seen it, but it's on my list.
it's absolutely incredible. Maestro has makeup effects that make me question reality.
Mm,
Um,
not digitally assisted.
no, not as far as I know. It was a year of explosive amounts well, that's a terrible word to use for that. A lot of blockbusters.
Explosive because of Oppenheimer. Is that?
Well, there's
Ironically, it did
Oppenheimer.
not bomb.
Yeah, Oppenheimer, Dungeons and Dragons, Mission Impossible, um,
Mm,
Super Mario, like back to back to back, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Like it was Indiana Jones 5 came out. Like it was like a machine gun of blockbusters through the first half of the year. And then an absolute screeching halt
yeah, they pulled
of
the e-brake. Yeah.
where like where you could go see movies and there were blockbusters coming out like Blue Beetle and Gran Turismo, which was like great, like underrated that one. Anyways,
Really? Wow.
um, so yeah, there were just these little cool movies that came out kind of through the second half of the year while everything was like quiet and weird. And then when the writer's strike lifted, like emotionally heavy movies started popping up towards the end of the year. But I think the event, the big thing that I want to know your opinion on first, is obviously what happened like socially with Barbenheimer. Have you seen Oppenheimer and Barbie?
That's a negative. I I'm gonna say this, and it's gonna come out being a lot more aggressive than I mean for it to be. I'm kind of tired of Christopher Nolan. Um, it like the Batman movies were really good, but do they belong on IMDb's user voted top movies of all time? Up there with Shawshank Redemption? No. Now, other movies like Interstellar blew me away.
Hmm.
But then he made, in my opinion, having not seen Oppenheimer, a similar movie in Dunkirk. You know, he seems to be fascinated with World War II, which when you're from the British Isles is a bigger deal because all of that was happening right there, assuming you're not in the Asia Pacific theater. So I get that, not obsession, maybe, but that fascination with World War II. But I did go into it thinking, you know, I don't like spending money ever. And I'm going to go see one movie during the summer, which is not entirely true. And we'll get to that. And I chose Barbie because it seemed to me to be the more culturally relevant film. Um, so all of that to say, no, I haven't seen Oppenheimer.
Well, you missed one of the most gut-wrenching existential nightmares that you'll ever fall in love with.
No,
Um
I did see Barbie.
Yeah, it is so weird. It's funny because I lose track of it. It's like my memory fades and I think of Barbie as just like enjoyable entertainment. Go back to it. There is a and there's no way they didn't collaborate to do this, but there is an inexplicable link, a tie into like world-ending consequences and sort of gender roles in society and identity. Like these themes are heavily prevalent through both movies, and I kind of boiled
Self
things down.
determination as well.
Yeah, I kind of boiled things down to uh bombs for boys and Barbies for girls. Like there was this sort of duality to it. I think these movies are going to be linked forever, and I really want one of these custom the people make like custom steel books and slipcovers and stuff where you can put both movies in one case and have
Yeah,
like the
yeah, yeah.
Barbenheimer art and stuff. I might be worth investing in something like that because I don't want to ever forget the anomaly that was. It's really cool.
Well, you say that, and I will say I do kind of have a chip on my shoulder. So my big thing is video games. You know that. March of 2020, it got lost in the shuffle because of the pandemic.
And
But
everything.
Doom Eternal and Animal Crossing New Horizons came out on the same day. And in the video game community, it had a sort of microcosm of Barbenheimer, where there were videos made of like Isabel shooting demons and Doom Guy going and like fishing and building things. You can buy shirts that say in the Doom Eternal font, Animal Crossing New Horizons, or in the Animal Crossing font, Doom Eternal. And it was this beautiful thing. And we thought, oh, we're never going to see this again until 2023 when we did on a much larger scale.
Yeah.
So I do feel compelled to mention that Doom Crossing, or I guess
Yeah.
Animal Crossing Eternal, walked so that Barbenheimer could run.
Yeah.
Like we were primed for this from a previous thing 3 years earlier.
And then a few months later, Saw Patrol kind of like limped its way through the
Which
internet and disappeared.
uh, multiple friends said that they were going to see Saw. And every time I was like, so you're going to the playground? Exactly. Yeah, we're going to go see Saw. Oh man, that sounds like a blast. I'm going to go down the slide. I will watch Oppenheimer. I will. Just a 3-hour movie. I gotta prepare myself for that. I'm not one of those people who's like, I love movies and I'm going to sit down for 3 hours and watch The Godfather every weekend. The Godfather 2, the extended cut. No, I'm not going to do that. I say that, and then I'll sit and play video games pretty much all day, which is a very different thing. But
The thing about Oppenheimer, though,
mm-hmm.
he veered into Scorsese territory. Watching that movie feels like watching a 3+ hour trailer for a person's life.
Mm-hmm.
There are moments that need to breathe, but I'm telling you, from the start, it's like
And that's the bomb.
And that's it. That's my review of the movie.
Nice. So to me, there's an extraction of that I keep hearing as like a big scene in the movie that's like rich with like emotion and suspense and anticipation. But as someone who works in data analytics for a living, it's kind of frustrating. And that is Matt Damon and Cillian Murphy talking about, what are the chances of us setting the world on fire? And he's like, oh, it's a non-zero chance. And he's like, oh, I'd prefer 0. And it's like this big, it's like, yeah, of course, you can't say 0 because as someone in data analytics, you can't. If you're being honest about your analysis, you're like, well, it's like, there's a 95% chance we'll be fine. Okay, what about that 5%? Sorry. Like, yeah.
It kind of feels like you're saying, but the context is a little bit different. They just kind of make a beat because and this is the impressive thing about that movie is if you walk away from the movie not thinking about your role in the world and what responsibility you have to do things, I think you might not have watched it. At least I don't know, like I don't want to put anything on anybody, but like yeah, it's the context where it's brought up is Benny Safdie has figured out, hey, I learned something crazy is technically possible, and we could end the Earth. And they're like, okay, well, we need to figure out what the chances are of that and weigh the pros and cons here. And it's just it's like that information is brought up in this way where you realize people are sinking so hard into tunnel vision about the creativity of like the project that I think if you had started and they were like, can we build this kind of bomb? And someone was like, hey, the first results that I found out of doing this math was that ending the world is on the table. I think people would have been like, okay, darn it, we have to shut the project down.
But
But
not
it's
like 90% of the projects he brings up like, oh, by the way, we
yeah,
could end all life on Earth if we do this.
yes. And then the moment you're talking about where Matt Damon chooses to question this and Cillian Murphy tells him about it is when they're on the testing site about to blow the bomb.
Okay, yeah, that does change things a little bit.
So
It's like, you mean like right now we could accidentally end all life on Earth.
yeah, so it's like yeah, what you're talking about is valid, but that's kind of the thing. Everything that you can say about like the content of this story and the real world things that happened is one aspect of it, but it's the way the story is told. And Christopher Nolan, yeah, he's got hits and misses. He gets a little too obsessed with the mechanics of time and some things, but like it felt so like cheap to just be like, I'm gonna go pick up this movie in Walmart right next to Haunting in Venice. You know, like I don't want to, nothing wrong with Haunting in Venice, but you know, it's
You sure about that?
it felt like something that you know how there's like how IMAX used to be at like museums and they used to just mostly have footage of like exploratory like nature discovery stuff, and it was like the Thing was going to see The Thing in IMAX. You wouldn't take that movie home. It is very much
A
an
theater experience.
in and its own. That's kind of what this felt like. This felt like it is supposed to be bigger than it is. And in the same kind of sense, Barbie feels a little bit more like home viewing friendly. The foundational thinking about like a world of people free from patriarchal values and uh the way to play on that tongue in cheek. I think my favorite line in that movie is when Ryan Gosling is like, once I realized it wasn't about horses, I kind of lost interest anyways. Like
Yeah, it that line smacks of like, well, you know, everybody else thinks it's the right thing to do, and so I was going along with it, but really I'm not as into it. And I think that's important.
yeah.
Is this a segue into Barbie? Because I got a lot to say about Barbie.
I think these are the two together, and then I think these are the two. Like, I think I want to pick out what your favorite movie you saw from last year was, if it's not Barbie.
Oh, it's
but
Barbie.
those are the ones that I want to run through critics critique. So,
Okay, so Barbie. I'm no longer talking to you, Eric. I'm talking to you, and I know I do this a lot. But if you have not seen Barbie, see Barbie. And I'm not saying that because I am Team Barbie and I bought a Barbie T-shirt or I bought an I Am Knuff hoodie, which I did not do because that smacks of like we're trying to squeeze every drop of revenue we can out of Barbie. But because Greta Gerwig created a movie that is one of the most culturally relevant movies that came out not only this year, but this millennium in the 2000s, in this century. I know the 2000s just started, but still, everyone needs to see Barbie, especially men need to see Barbie because you if you're paying attention and you're internalizing the content, you will learn some important lessons in that movie. The experience that women go through is fundamentally different from the experience that men go through in at the very least American culture, but broadly in general. It is summed up in. Have you watched Brooklyn Nine-Nine?
yeah.
It's summed up in an episode. Terry Crews's character is a police officer, but is racially profiled. Peralta and Santiago are talking to Terry Crews's kids, and they're trying to explain like why this happened. And so Amy starts off with, you know how it's harder to be a woman? And the twins go, it is? And it's really funny, but that is the densest boiling down of what Barbie is trying to explain to you, because it is. And
Yeah.
everybody needs to be mindful of how they treat each other, not just men and women, but in general. Anyway, I'll take my soapbox down for a minute. What did you think of Barbie?
I actually I I'm I am curious about more of your take on it, but I guess for a minute, if I have to
You have to. I'll
speak on
time
it,
you at 1 minute. Yeah.
we're sitting in the theater, and we get past the bit where the dad is doing Duolingo, which I'm on like a 500-day streak of, and
Well done.
I thought that moment kind of reflected the way the comedy in that movie should be taken. And I think there's a bunch of garbage takes on this movie from people who just do not get it. And I feel like this is the movie to take a look at people who used to cry more, even though this is dying down, about like cancel culture and all that, and how you can't say anything anymore. And how it's like, this is just a movie about jokes that you don't want to
Right.
hear, right? Like, yeah, some white dude, like, boligrafos. Ding. Like that is me. And the movie is like,
Right.
haha, this is you. And in a way,
Yep.
it's sort of like you're not unique, you're not original. There's all these like ugly sort of underpinnings that you could take away from it if you don't get it.
I
But
will say it is trying to communicate something like that, in my opinion. It's not like saying you're not original. It's saying like you're not as original as you think. Expand your horizons a little bit. Go do something you haven't done before.
oh, I don't even think it's all that. I think it's just funny. Husband is in the position that normally the wife figure is in, where they are barely in the movie
Yeah.
and they're like consequenceless. And if they had gone one step further into like Ken kidnaps him and he's like a damsel in distress in their
Yeah. Yeah.
patriarchy or whatever, you know, it would be like a thing. It's so funny sometimes to be called out for like the funny little things that we do, and they're not bad. And it's like, you know, there's just as much sincerity and truth to the notion that a guy in uh a combined race marriage, I mean, he's gonna try and adopt a little bit of culture, a little bit of language. He's doing
Yeah.
something wholesome and like nice. So nobody is sitting here saying that anything is wrong with this. So if you take that as, oh, they're insulting me, then you're implanting yourself that what the guy is doing is bad. And
Right.
I think that says everything about the audience reaction to it, and how by the end of the movie, the couple sitting next to my wife and I got up, and the guy was like storming his way out, like shaking his head, like frustrated. And the girl was kind of like looking at the screen and kind of, I was like,
Oh boy. Oh no.
oh, poor you. The
But
conversation you're gonna have to have in the car on the way home is
you
both,
don't know what happened. Go ahead. Sorry. Yeah, you're exactly on track with what I was about to say.
yeah, it's both. I'm so sad that she's gonna have to go through it, but it's also, it's like the movie's gonna continue in their car on the way home with this sort of joke that neither of them get to be in on, where he's just like ranting about uh woke whatever, and she's
He's
just sitting there.
continuing to be Ken when
Yeah,
Ken is the antagonist.
yeah,
And it as long as at some point in the future he comes to a realization. I think that's what I was going to say is like hopefully temporary discomfort between that couple will lead to an understanding later.
yeah,
Like that to me in any conversation, I'm this kind of person. Temporary discomfort is better than long-term friction. So I'd rather have a lot of discomfort at the very beginning saying, look, I'm not comfortable with that, and have some friction, and then afterwards have an understanding, rather than having this like anxiety that continues to happen.
Well,
Uh,
and also I think that's what elevates this movie beyond just being like a popcorn movie. And it's that notion that someone who watched it had a reaction to this art and it showed a little bit of their colors to someone else who saw that movie and found truth in it and now understands their partner in a different way. Like I never would have considered these qualities as something to be concerned about, but I can see them now. And that's what I think the foundation of all art is processing and making sense of the experience we have of the world. And so like I think the I'm Just Ken song, which they barely got into the movie and had to do in like one or two takes, is a masterpiece. I think it's adorable just listening to the behind the scenes stuff about how like Margot Robbie, who had a heavy hand in the production of the movie, um is talking about when they're all uh gradually doing their retakeover of Barbie Land, and
they're
they get
deprogramming, yeah.
they get all of the Kens to sit by the campfire and
And
play
I'll talk
music
about
to
The
them.
Godfather.
I love the Godfather bit. That's the other part where it was like poking at me, and I was
Yeah, you're
like,
like, oh no.
ah. But
That
the
that
she
changed my conversations with my wife of like, rather than just talk at her about something, I'll ask, it's like, is this something like you're interested in talking about? And if
yeah,
it's
yeah,
not, don't feel bad. She's a
yeah.
whole other person that has her own thoughts and ideas. Uh,
The thing is that that bit where they're at the campfire scene, she's talking about how they all know and are completely conscious of the fact that what they're doing is making fun of a cringy thing that guys do to do that.
right.
But at the same time, there she is being wooed by guitar by Ryan Gosling across a fire pit, and there's like a part of her that's like, I really enjoy this. And I don't know, it's kind of adorable. There's everything about this movie that feels like it's sort of poking fun at something is also kind of being sincere about it and kind of endorsing things that are
Right.
wholesome
Well,
or more healthy.
yeah, I think the issue when it comes to or what they're trying to communicate is that there are elements of enjoyment in these things, but when you are the only person determining what you do on a date, for example, that's not good. You need to communicate. Eric, that was longer than a minute. Your your take on Barbie, but so not only, hang on, what am I trying to say? Usually, I think there's an association, whether it's true or not. I think there's an association that you're only going to learn a valuable lesson from a very artistic movie, rather than a huge budget, brightly lit, loud fest of just a good time that is Barbie.
Do you guys ever
Yeah,
think about
like,
death?
yeah, like, do you guys ever think about dying? As she's like, that is important
Yeah.
because I hate to tell you this, we're going to die one day.
Yeah.
And it's important to not just be like shocked at that fact because it's something you know. You've got
Mhm.
skeletons on your shirt. But get a good stretch in there. Uh, that to me, that's the whole movie of Barbie is you're going to learn very valuable lessons while also watching a very well written movie with a huge budget. So I know we both have a lot to say about both of these movies. I want to jump to whether or not Barbie was deserving of its critical rating. Now, I can't speak to
So
Oppenheimer. I don't know.
oh,
So,
well, I'll run through that one after we do this, but there's some updates. There's some
oh
new
no.
things I've
Oh my
learned,
God.
some new definitions. So this is how we do critics critique. We take a look at the IMDb rating, the Metacritic rating, the Rotten Tomatoes rating, and the cinema score. But context. Cinema
Mm-hmm.
score. And I'm not gonna front here, I learned this through Dead Meat. Um, is much more a predictor of the legs that a movie is going to have in theaters. It is the initial reactions of people. There are people who fill out scorecards, they give it a letter rating and whatnot. But what that letter more reflects is sort of a prediction of how successful the movie is going to be.
Like in
And
terms of revenue rather than critical response.
Yes. And so what you get is the numbers here are slightly skewed depending on the genre. The success of that movie lies in different ranges. So I think for like a mega blockbuster, like something like the Marvels or Ant-Man or those that Guardians of the Galaxy, if you get like a B or a B minus, that's apparently atrocious. Like, because
For something that in 5 years ago would have generated $1 billion for Marvel, a B
yes,
minus is no good.
a B minus basically tracks that the money that it's going to make is going to massively under deliver the amount that they spent on it. Versus like your horror feature like Talk to Me. If that gets a like C, then it's a good bet that it is going to have a lot of word of mouth and do well and whatnot.
Mhm.
The can be challenged on that, but Barbie got an A, not an
Cool.
A plus, but it got an A.
I would imagine A
Um,
pluses are not handed out frequently.
yeah. So, and but the tricky thing there we really can't evaluate whether or not this score is fair because it's a direct one-to-one representation of someone's personal opinion to a scorecard that's just averaged. And so you can kind of argue that that's the same with all of these like review aggregators, but this is literally saying based on the people's ratings of a movie, this letter indicates that it is going to make a lot of money or not. And so with this score, since Barbie became the highest grossing movie of for Warner Brothers of all time, I would argue that an A plus would be warranted, right? I mean, if you're the top, you should have the top score. So in this case, what we're kind of saying is, I mean, I don't know if you agree with the logic here, then we are saying it, but I'm saying that based on what this seems to be measuring, it didn't predict quite the level of success the movie was going to have.
So I understand it. I think a prediction of Barbie, I think an A is fair because one, they didn't know that Greta Gerwig had made like this like incredible masterpiece of writing. You can see the flash and the money spent on it. They marketed it huge. It was coming out at the same time as Oppenheimer, generating the Barbenheimer thing. So that might take it up a little bit to an A plus, like the synergy with Oppenheimer, despite them being
Mm.
very different. But I think an A is fair. Just because you didn't know the content, the real meat of this movie, but everybody knows what Barbie is. They marketed the hell out of it. They spent tons of money, and that's apparent. So the production value is high. I mean, looking back, it's easy for us to say, yeah, this should have been an A plus, but they didn't know. They didn't know all of the things we know now.
Now I'm going to disappoint you. I'm going to start lowest to highest here. So IMDb,
Okay.
the average
All
rating is
user voted, by the way, as I mentioned earlier.
460,000 votes. Okay.
Okay.
6.9 out of 10.
Okay. Yeah.
Um,
I
the
disagree with that. And I believe that is not necessarily review bombing, but certainly.
well, 98,000 is a 7, 91,000 is an 8. So like 200K of that is right around the 7
Like
to 8
perfect.
range.
Oh no, 78. Okay, got it.
So it's just, when you pull the weight of the 39,000 people that gave it a 1, um gee, I wonder what their problems were.
Right.
Um
Okay. Yeah. When you describe it as that, like 8.5% of the votes were ones. Meanwhile,
mhm,
40% were 7 and 8.
yeah.
But then
Um
12% was a 10. That's huge.
yeah. Yeah. I mean that's 58,000 people. Like yeah. So like yeah. More people thought it was a 10 than a 1. I still think I still think that's low.
Yeah. So I also, or as I said before, I disagree with that IMDb score. But I think it's important to mention again that IMDb is a user rated thing. So anybody can just go on there, create an account while they're boiling mad that women had a chance to express themselves and write a review about Barbie.
Or mad that they got called out for using Duolingo.
Look,
There's
Duolingo
like
is a free service that will teach you a new language. Do it,
yeah.
please.
And even still, it's like becoming a punching bag for things like Babbel and a bunch of people online who want to trend. Like, you want to learn a new language, you got to fully expose yourself to that language. You can't learn it from.
Did you just say expose yourself? Please don't do that.
To that language.
Oh, sorry.
So Metacritic,
Mhm.
80, and that's 269 reviews. And yeah, I mean, I still think that's low. I just don't see this as like a B movie. I don't see this as something where someone's like, yeah, I can kind of see what they were going for, but the execution leave blah, 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 blah. Like it's just,
is it perfect? I don't think so. But
yeah.
better than B, I absolutely agree. That it's because oh my gosh, everything is so plastic in Barbie world. It's an incredible production. To look at that, look at their Barbie houses and their cars and everything, and it looks like the Malibu Barbie dream house that was big when I was a kid because I'm an old man. It looks like that. It's incredible what they achieved beyond all the writing and stuff that we talked about and the cultural impact. Like, it looks so good and the music is so good. It is like a culmination of effort from lots of very good artists who were all very well rewarded. And please, 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 Mattel, right? Mattel made Barbie. Is that right?
Yep.
Please, Mattel, learn the right lessons from this.
Yeah, that's
don't make an Uno movie thinking that you're going to have the Barbie success. Unless Greta Gerwig writes with or
Noah
writes
Baumbach.
Noah Baumbach writes the Uno movie as well, you're going to have another Battleship on your hands. Okay?
Yeah.
But no, I agree with you that I disagree with this score. Oh my gosh, you just said something that set me off. Taylor Kitsch was robbed, okay? Taylor Kitsch was not, you know, he's no like Shakespeare, but he's a good actor and he's handsome. Where is he?
Shakespeare, the famous actor.
Yeah, you know, whatever. He did act, but he mostly wrote. Like John Carter of Mars should have been a big deal. And then they said, "Oh, well, people don't want to hear about Mars. Let's drop Mars." So then it was John Carter. Is this a sequel to Coach Carter? Whose idea was that to drop Mars from the title? Mars is cool. Are you kidding me? Anyway, sorry. Cut that out and put it as another outtake for our patrons.
No,
we don't have yet.
That in.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Okay. So, Rotten Tomato, that it was an 88% fresh, but the average rating is an 8 out of 10. So again, B. And I don't get what is sagging down these things into a B. Like,
it's a high B though on the critic representation.
A high B percentage of people said it was better good than bad. Yeah. But their average number is 80.
I see what you're saying. Okay. Yeah, that's no good. I disagree hard. Yeah.
And then with the audience review, it's 83%. The average rating out of it is a 4.2 out of 5. So like 84%.
I say 4.2 is reasonable, but not what I agree with.
I mean, I know the movie is not for everyone. The one flaw that I will give it is I think some of the more like adult themes and concepts kids would be bored by. Mm-hmm. You know, like I think you just pointed out in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, the funny part of the situation. You know how it's hard to be a woman, and the kids are like, "What?" I feel like this movie is that for them. They're like, "Hey, kids who like Barbie, you know how hard it is to be a woman?" And all the kids are like, "What?" "Oh, hey, cool, the dream house."
Yeah, take a look at the dream house, kids. Don't worry about that. I don't
Yeah.
know. I think that the kids will be grabbed by the intro where you hear Lizzo, and the day goes on, and then they do it all again the next day. I think kids would be grabbed by that. But you're right, like that middle part where it's much more adult themes. Uh, it might sag a little bit, but there's enough comedy in there
Yeah.
to like when they get arrested
Yeah.
and Ken is
Like,
posing with his like thing. That's really funny.
yeah. And there's plenty to enjoy. But I just think if anyone is going to give this movie a B instead of an A, it's going to be kids.
That's fair. Or man children who are grown men who you know, might have been offended.
Yeah. So
So we can sum up Barbie by saying like it's a bit lower than it should be. The critical response slash audience response, especially the audience response, is lower than it should be.
mhm.
I would argue not by too much. Is it one of
I,
the best movies of all time? I gotta say yes. I gotta say
I
yes. It's so tightly made, and it's
you know
just
what?
under 2 hours.
I will say yes because it is a marriage of entertainment and artistic
Mm,
value. So like
right.
where I think you could get thoughtful critiques about, like gender roles and things like that harder from other movies that are all escaping me because I decided to start trying to list them.
Mhm.
Um you don't get the entertainment value out of them that you get out of this. And as far as other movies that would try and be like Battleship or like toy movies or just like funny and entertaining, there are just not a lot of comedies that are like being successful right now, except for Bottoms, which was amazing. But anyways, or
Bottoms
um
are amazing.
and they don't have like the weight and the thoughtfulness and like the sort of richness that comes out of the rest of it. So I would say, yeah, I would say this is more of a go-to. Takes a seat as like a great movie to go to for a lot out of entertainment value. So yeah.
Now, it's interesting. Segue. It's interesting that you mentioned a culmination. We mentioned, either or both of us mentioned this, a culmination of artistic effort from a variety of people. You compare that to Oppenheimer, where the driving force was Christopher Nolan. Now, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of cast and crew whose artistic merit helped bring this to the fore, but it is very much a Nolan project. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah.
So, how did it do on cinema score to
So
start with?
yeah, so I'm gonna kind of like speed through this one a little bit because I pretty much agree with everything here.
And I
It
haven't
got it.
seen it.
It also got an A cinema score, which is something because that means like when they were tracking the same information they got from Barbie and Oppenheimer with those cards around the same time, they made the same prediction for both of them based on what they were seeing.
Which real quick, I know you said you want to speed through it, but I disagree with that prediction because you listed all these factors earlier that would make it not
Oh,
broad appeal, but lo and behold, mass appeal. Now it's hard to say if that's
well,
because of Barbie and people saying, "Oh, we should go see Oppenheimer at the same time," or
yeah.
is it because those people would have seen Oppenheimer otherwise? I think it's hard to say.
Yeah, well, the thing to keep in mind is that the prediction is not based on factors outside of the reviews people get after they watched the movie. So,
Right.
I could say, like, I think I kind of see what you're saying in the sense that, like, they probably should have predicted this wasn't going to be as successful based on how long the movie is and how much investment people need to put into it and the intensity of the
Exactly.
subject
Yeah.
matter,
Yeah.
the R rating, and all that. But they don't care about all that. They just
Oh,
care
I see.
about when people come out of the theater, what did they put on their scorecard? And like there are
Oh,
little
I
factors
see.
on
I
there.
see. I see. I
Yeah,
didn't
of like
realize
how
this was like based on those audiences saying,
mhm.
"Here's my scorecard. I'll turn it in. Please give me $5."
Yeah, I mean like and so it's like they put in factors like did you see this movie alone? Like did
Mhm.
you or would you take your family to see it? Like all this kind of stuff. So the impressive thing is the type of audience that would go see Oppenheimer is different than would go see Barbie. But you're still right in the sense that I wonder how much bleed over was there for people who were into the
the
two of them happening
Barbenheimer
at
phenomenon.
once. Yeah, so you have like the energy of someone who wouldn't typically see Oppenheimer but would see Barbie, who's doing the double feature, who's filling out that scorecard, and it kind of maybe boosts things. I wonder if it wasn't Barbenheimer, if the just by filtering out the people who wouldn't have seen Oppenheimer if it weren't for Barbenheimer, like how different it would have been. Um, Go away, WinZip. Um, so yeah,
Thank you
so
for your
then
service, Winsett.
the fascinating thing about the IMDb rating is that it is also it's an 8.4 out of 10, which is
Okay.
higher than a 6.9 by like a lot. But
Right.
185k, 31% of that is solid 10. Another
Ooh.
28% of that is 9. This goes like evenly down until like 1.4% gave it a 5. And then it's like 0.6, 0.4, 0.3, and then 1.2% gave it a 1. So 7.2 thousand people gave it a 1 out of 594,000 people. So yeah, and that's the thing is the key here with Oppenheimer is if you are in any way wanting to invest your time in the movie, it is that rewarding, I think. So
Okay.
Metacritic, universal acclaim based on 69 critic reviews, it's an 89. Based on 1,568 user ratings, it's an 8.7. Um,
Which you think
yeah,
is fair?
I guess because it's like it's not quite it's like if you're over 90, I'm assuming you're saying this movie is near perfect. And
Right.
this movie is not perfect. Um but it does approach that territory where I think the imperfections improve it. It's like when something is more perfect because it is imperfect. And then you do feel the runtime. Someone who tries to tell you they don't feel the runtime, even though
Hmm.
the pacing is really great, is just blowing smoke.
Yeah. What
But
and Barbie was an 80, is that right?
yeah.
Ooh.
So
Ooh. Hmm. I
yeah, well,
yeah.
I mean, hey, the other big issue that I have, and the reason why I might actually like knock this down a notch is ironically, in the sense that both movies are about the relationship between men and women. The representation of women in this movie is iffy. And I would like a guest. There's this person Kenzie who kind of brought up. She's amazing. She does like Oscar Central and all this other stuff, and she's like out in LA. But like, she kind of talked and brought this up, and it was something that like bugged me. But like, Emily Blunt is fantastic in the movie, except for a little bit of the old age makeup, which that's not really her fault. Um, but she is sort of voiceless through most of the movie, even though the consequences of what happening are really heavy for her. And then his relationship with Florence Pugh's character is is so sort of centered. I mean, and now everything about this is easily explained by the fact that this is Oppenheimer's view of the world and story. It would be disingenuous to try and like flesh out more of this other character if that's not the way Oppenheimer compartmentalized these people in his head. You know, he was
Right.
unfaithful to his wife. He did these things, like the way that it does seem have like verisimilitude that the way that he viewed those relationships of women in his life is the way we get the sense of them in the movie.
So
But
I will also add that Barbie and its subject matter being about women's roles in society is a product of the society we live in up until now. And I can't say too much about the writers and producers of Oppenheimer not including or fleshing out too many women because women weren't in those projects. I'm not trying to be a patriarchy apologist, but it's because of that patriarchal focus that women weren't as involved as they should have been. And thus, this being a biopic, are not going to be as prominent. Now, you mentioned being unfaithful to his wife. Could they have fleshed that out, shown a little more of her point of view? Possibly. Having not seen it, I don't know.
There was a point in the movie where I felt like some of the nudity and stuff was like exploitative. But then there's
Was Cillian Murphy nude?
Kinda.
Juicy hog?
I can't remember. There's a point where he's sitting in an armchair.
Then it is skewed. My opinion on nudity in movie is, if you see a naked woman, you should see a naked man. And that's not just because of my sexuality, but
there is a meaningful representation of nakedness that it goes into really hard in one particular scene. That is Emily Blunt's subjective experience of watching like the dirty laundry getting aired in public, like when she's watching Oppenheimer get interviewed. And so they use that in a really powerful way in at least one scene. It's just like, you hear me using the word used a lot. And that's where it kind of gotten to me, is like, you're making very powerful points, but you're sort of using a real person that lived to make this point and kind of filtering them into something. So it's a little hinky, but I don't know. Again, still, I would agree, this isn't like a near perfect movie. It's really long. There's a lot to be said about like where you choose to tell this story from and how you do it, but everything else in the thing is just flat out genius, and it's like larger than
okay. So it's a very, very good movie. Maybe not over 90%.
Yeah.
So where did it end up on Rotten Tomatoes?
Over 90%.
Oh,
but 93% of critics said it was more good than bad.
Right.
But their average rating is an 8.6 out of 10. And then 91% of audience said it was better good than bad, but their average rating is a 4.5 out of 5, which is like a 90.
Yeah.
So I got to give it to it. Like, I'm 100% on board with the reaction of the world to Oppenheimer. And that being said, I hope you see it soon.
I just may.
So we're going to go into our segment Skittles O'Henry, where we talk pretty much about Skittles O'Henry and what he's up to.
Yeah, you can find Skittles O'Henry on, I'm going to do this again at the end. You can find Skittles O'Henry at twitch.tv/Skittles O'Henry. They play games and stuff, and I know them very well. And so on stream, Skittles O'Henry has not been doing much of anything, doing just chatting streams during the workday because they just don't have time to do much else. However, outside of streaming, gearing up to play Alan Wake 2, which I haven't played yet.
Ooh.
So here's the thing. I play games a lot. I'm going to stop saying they. I'm going to say I. It's me. It's me. I'm the streamer. It's me. So on stream, you're not going to get much of this, but I can go ahead and tell you my thoughts on the, I guess I would call it the AWE series, Altered World Event series. And I'll explain that. Someone in my life that I'm very close to, my brother, I gave him a copy of Berserk, one of these deluxe volumes. He hasn't read it yet. And he gave me an ultimatum and said, I'll read Berserk if you play Alan Wake 2. And I love Berserk. Like, it is one of my all-time favorite IPs. I don't have any tattoos, and I'm considering getting a tattoo of the brand of sacrifice from Berserk. So I love it. So I said, okay, fine, but I need to play other games that lead up to Alan Wake 2. So I played Alan Wake 1, a remastered version, which thankfully removed all the Verizon commercials that you find on TVs and the branding on the batteries that says Energizer. So it doesn't feel as soulless as it did before, but the combat is kind of boring. It's kind of one note, shine a flashlight on an enemy until you can attack them. I mean, that's a cool idea. Like, the darkness is your enemy, and it's hard to convey that. But they don't really do much else with it. But the story ideas are pretty good of like questioning your reality. Alan Wake questioning his reality. Is he just a character in this story? Did he write this story? Did someone else write this story? That's fascinating to look at externally. Now, his story continues in Alan Wake 2, which I have not played yet. I am in the middle of playing a game called Control. Control may be one of my favorite video games of all time. This is made by the same people and takes place in the same universe as Alan Wake, where there is the Federal Bureau of Control who is aware and triaging altered world events, AWEs. Control is more like if you combined so many different influences from the X-Files, House of Leaves, SCP, if you're familiar with that, Secure, Contain, Protect. Why are you looking around? Did somebody lend you a copy of House of Leaves like 8 or 9 years ago and you still haven't read it?
Yeah, it's only 8 or 9 years ago. Wasn't
Not 12.
wasn't 10 or 11.
That's fun to think about, kids. So I will say Control, not only having all of those dressings of those IPs I described, all of those influences, and it doesn't feel like just an imitation of those things. It feels like a wholly unique experience. Real quick, let me run through sort of the feel of Control, because all that paperwork stuff is present, but it's not you doing it. Like you are encountering the Bureau of Control as an outsider. You show up to this brutalist skyscraper in New York City and you go inside and no one's around. And you're like, where is everybody? And you're talking to someone. The character Jesse is talking to someone. And instead of hearing an audible reply, there'll be an overlay on the screen that's barely present of like a spiral made of pieces of glass. So someone is responding, but you can't hear it. She is intrinsically linked to some entity. So you go into the building, no one's there. So you go through the metal detectors, nothing happens. Security office is empty. You go upstairs to the atrium, like sort of the second level, but it's still part of the same lobby room. There's a portrait of some old stuffy guy. There's a portrait of a janitor with his back to the viewer. And it says something like, "Our workers at the Bureau." And then there's a portrait. There's a portrait of the director of the FBC, Trench. You move through some hallways. You don't know what's going on. And you run into that janitor. And he's kind of hard to understand. He speaks fine English, but he also tosses out Finnish words and phrases just randomly. And he's like, you must be here for the assistant janitor position. Keep going down the hall, go to the elevator, and you'll find it. So you keep going down the hall, and despite heading in the same direction, you return to the lobby. Except now, where the portrait of the janitor was, there's an elevator. So you go up the elevator. You stumble upon the director's office, where the former director, evidently, he has died by his own hand. The gun's still present, and the entity tells you, pick up the gun. So you do, and you're immediately transported to the astral plane where an unknown voice, only visible in subtitles, tells you, work your way through this obstacle course if you're worthy of having the gun. So you get the gun, you complete the obstacle course, and they say, congratulations, director. Welcome to the Federal Bureau of Control. You're now Jesse Faden, director of the Federal Bureau of Control. All the portraits that were of Director Trench have inexplicably changed to you. You encounter people who say, oh, you must be the new director. And it's just sort of a matter of course for them. It is so much fun. The only thing I can ding it on is like the combat sometimes feels a little like tough where it shouldn't be. Nevertheless, the story is very interesting, which I won't say too much more because it's hard to say much more without spoiling anything at all.
Sure.
But apparently Alan Wake 2 improves all of the combat from Alan Wake 1, takes some cues from Control, but also ramps all of that stuff about questioning your own reality to like an extreme degree, like making you question your reality, not Alan Wake questioning his own. You may have seen the smash hit Herald of Darkness, which my brother described as being by the best fictional band of all time, the Old Gods of Asgard. If you haven't watched it, it's very entertaining and is kind of like a recap of Alan Wake 1. So they're teaching you without knowing that you're being taught anything.
In the month ahead, we're gonna end up talking like and coming up with a new episode like a month from now. Today, really yesterday, but today, Mean Girls, the movie adapted into a musical, readapted into a movie, all from the mind of Tina Fey and the original writer of the book and the same collaborators, is in theaters. And I want to know your predictions about that, about how people will respond. And
so it's one of those things where Mean Girls has developed a cult following that is like a showstopper of cult followings. I will add that Mean Girls from 2004 is such a well-written comedy that if you haven't seen it, it is, again, one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. I think that enough people are passionate about Mean Girls that they will see this one, the adaptation of an adaptation of Mean Girls, which is itself an adaptation of a book called Queen Bees and Wannabes. I think that's what it's called. Is it going to do much more than that? I don't think so. I think that it's a little too old. It was 20 years ago that Mean Girls came out. That cult following that has been cultivated since then, I don't know. The thing is, I don't think we have another Barbie on our hands, but we could have another Mean Girls on our hands. If this movie is well made and well written, it doesn't take off at the start, it gains a cult following, and we'll have another one in 20 years. That's what I really think. What do you think?
It's so curious to me because it's just a bizarre concept to come to do like a remake and to do it. It's like so close to The Color Purple, which is another movie that adapted into a musical, developed back into a movie. And it's just like was so shocked and confused by the movie's existence that it's like on my radar and I'm curious about it, but I'm also not sure about why it's dumped in January. So I kind of feel like this could be this year's Megan. Which is a movie that has this following.
I have thoughts about that movie too.
It's not bad. There's a lot of little things in there.
That's literally what I was gonna say. It's not as bad as I thought.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. Like it's a franchise that has legs to it and is interesting. And so I don't know, it just could be one of those movies where somebody's like, we need a slot for this. We don't want to compete with some of the other big releases this year. So let's kind of like kick off the year and make a little bit of money, or who knows? Like they got to predict like the audience that likes Mean Girls, when are they going to see it? But I'm going to see it today. Yeah. So then that is one of the things we'll look for. This year ahead is insane. Marvel is putting out a couple of TV shows, but it's only putting out one movie if that movie doesn't move, and it's Deadpool 3. And so it's going to be Marvel's first MCU X-Men movie. And I'm super excited for that conceptually, but I have feelings about Sean Levy, the director, and the way he is with stuff like Free Guy and the Atom Project, the movies that he's made with Ryan Reynolds. It's not a heavy superhero year, but that's because people are gearing up for more big superhero things, like big Avengers movies coming, James Gunn's new DCU starting the year after. Like we're gonna get this quiet period of less of your typical tentpoles that we've been seeing, but there's a lot of good stuff coming this year. So take things 1 month at a time. Thank everybody for watching and listening. I am Eric, and I'm High Contrast FLM pretty much everywhere: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Just find me if you're interested and you want to ramble about any of the stuff here or tell us any of your opinions. Also YouTube, I guess, which is where you're watching this. What about where can they find you, Will?
You can find me at Skittles O'Henry. That's Skittles O'Henry on Twitter and Skittles O'Henry on Twitch. You could find me as Skittles O'Henry on YouTube, but there's not much there right now. I'm thinking about changing that more as that develops. Thank you. So that's the ending, right? We're done with that. And we can just BS. Okay. So in Alan Wake 2, Sam Lake plays Alex Casey in a side story written by Alan Wake, maybe.
Okay, wow. Okay.
So you don't know what's happening. Okay, real quick. Hey, the end of Alan Wake is the only time I was like, wait, holy shit, what? And it was like this other writer is guiding you through the universe because it may be his story that you're in. And you're going into the darkness entity. I forget what it's called. The dark presence. That's it. And he's like, oh, by the way, here's this doppelganger of you. His name is Mr. Scratch. Your friends will meet him soon. Mr. Scratch is a name for the devil. And you are like, wait, what? And then you just move on. And then the doppelganger, Mr. Scratch, is like grinning at you like this. And it's like, what the fuck is happening? Am I the good? Wait a minute, am I the good guy? And then the game is over.